Chapter 2 is about management learning, and this chapter talks about all of the different approaches to management. So, like any other topic, management has history that can be traced back, for quite a while, even the 20th century when Henry Ford was looking at mass production. So, the big takeaway for this chapter is that I want you to be able to identify and describe 5 of the management approaches that are in this chapter. And so if you look at the chapter on page 23, you'll see that the chapter starts out talking about the classical management approaches. So one of the classical management approaches would be Taylor's scientific management approach. So if you were going to identify and describe 5 different approaches, that would be one of them. So Taylor's scientific management approach. And you would talk about how Taylor used that and looked at motion studies, but that would be one of them. Another one would be Weber's bureaucratic organization approach. So that would be a second management approach from this chapter. And again, these are kind of the classical management approaches. So that would be the second classical management approach. And then Fayol's administrative principles would be a third type of management approach that the textbook talks about. Then we kind of get into more of the behavioral approaches in this chapter. And one of those would be Follett's organizations as community approach. This is Mary Follett, and your book on page 28 talks about she looked more for personal fulfillment and good relationships and people being social. So this would be another management approach. So your book has, several of them throughout this chapter. The Hawthorne studies are another one. Maslow is listed in this chapter, and he talked about human needs and the levels and what needs to be satisfied first. So that's another management approach. McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y, that was yet another management approach. And then you kind of get into the more recent approaches. And so we move more into the ones that are out there now where we use quantitative analysis. So that's another management approach. Organizations as systems is another one. And then contingency thinking and TQM are yet another. So your book lists, lots and lots of management approaches. Evidence-based management is the last one that the chapter talks about. So if you're asked to identify and describe 5, you can pick any 5 from all of these different topics, and you would want to identify them and describe them. And then you might want to know why a manager would use one particular management approach. So of all of them, take a look at them and choose the one that you think is best. Typically in management, there's no one best way to do something all the time, but you may think one of these approaches is the best one. And so if you were asked that question, you would want to be able to articulate why you think one of these is the best one. So that's the big takeaway from chapter 2.